I gotta fix I gotta fix it. I didn't even notice it when I was doing it either.
It gets me every time.
Anyway, good evening, afternoon, morning, whenever you're tuning in. This is our first kind of full slate of college football with Tailgate Trash Talk, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We got week 0 in the books. We'll talk a little bit about week 0, big upset. And then we got week 1 games on the slate. Florida State continues to be a top 10 team since no AP rankings or anything like that this past Tuesday. So going into this week, we still have Florida State on the board. We're going to talk top 25 matchups and highlight Notre Dame, Texas A&M as College Game Day heads to College Station for a big matchup between the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and the Aggies of Texas A&M. Bentley, how are you doing, man?
I am good. As you see me scribbling here, I think that I'm going to be an analog guy this year. I got a legal pad.
I like it.
I don't know why. I just had the urge to write stuff down. I mean, you and I both work jobs here where we just kind of stare at screens forever and ever, and then stare at them some more.
Yeah.
So I think writing could be good for me
for a minute. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. First question for you though: Are you prepared for 4 straight days of college football? 5. I'm sorry, 5 straight days of college football, because we have Thursday action.
Yes.
We have Friday action.
Yep.
We obviously have Saturday action. We have Sunday action and Monday action.
And Monday. College
football, yes. They're doing a good job of seizing kind of that big opportunity before the NFL starts to really dominate a weekend. How excited are you for 5 straight days of college football, man?
I could not be more excited. I'm going to be honest. It's been a long, long time since we had numerous games in a row. Obviously, Saturday we had a bunch of games in a row, but there's no overlapping. You're not jumping around looking at different things. So you throw in 5 nights of college football and a little tea time action early on Friday.
Yeah.
I'm a happy camper. You know what I'm saying?
There you go. Live it up, dude. Live it up.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's jump into week 0, right? We had a couple of matchups that were kind of, whatever, right? But we had one big upset to kick off the college football season. Florida State goes out and makes a statement to the College Football Playoff Committee and the rest of the college football world to prove what their gripe was about being left out last year, right? I mean, the state of Georgia State of Georgia beat the dog shit out of them the last 2 games that Florida State has played since being left out. Georgia beat them 745-3, and then Georgia Tech upset them this past weekend. Talk to me about this upset, though, man, because we talked a lot about DJ last year, right? At times, because he looked a lot better with Oregon State than he did with Clemson. Now, I think what Oregon State did, and I want to get your thoughts on this if I'm way off base here, but I think what Oregon State did that neither Clemson nor Florida State in week 1 against Georgia Tech did is Oregon State took advantage of what DJ does well. It's quick hitting passes and it's running the ball. Let him run the fucking ball. Florida State never really got him into a rhythm running the ball. Do you think that was more a product of Georgia Tech, or do you think that Florida State's making the same mistake that Clemson did with DJ Uiagalelei?
I think it was a little bit of both, right? We all watched that game Saturday, and we saw a big number 44 running around with his cowboy pillow pad on the back of his neck, playing middle linebacker for Georgia Tech. I wouldn't want to run the ball towards that guy, so I don't really blame DJ for not doing that. But I also blame Mike Norvell and that offensive staff down there in Tallahassee. They didn't really seem prepared for the kind of swarming defense that Georgia Tech was going to play. I do think Georgia Tech was a little undervalued going in this game, probably. I know I gave out -10.5, laid the points with Florida State, but I expected a lot more from Florida State's offensive linemen to be able to kind of handle it. And they lost the battle in the trenches all day long. And
on both sides of the ball, too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned doing what DJ does best, which is the quick hitters, screenplays, stuff like that. They didn't really kind of dive into that style of offense until it was a little bit too late. And then he was just out of rhythm, and Georgia Tech had all the confidence in the world, and it kind of got out of hand on them. I still think, obviously, it's a 3-point game. They win at the buzzer. I mean, obviously, Florida State had a chance to win, but
sure.
Football is a game kind of built on momentum, right? College football, especially, that if you're able to get that, you can kind of either, if you're Florida State, you can rise above the competition, your offense just flows, or if you're like Georgia Tech, who is the lesser talented team, and I give them credit for winning this game while being lesser talented, but what they did was they drug Florida State down into the mud, and they forced DJU to be out of his comfort zone, and they brought pressure, and they just clogged up those rushing lanes. And Florida State, like you said, lost a battle of the trenches on both sides of the ball and was never really able to get anything going on offense specifically.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk all week kind of leading up to this game that, like, Florida State might have the best front seven in football, or in college football. Defensively, the best front seven in college football. They got fucking bullied this weekend, right? Georgia Tech ran it down their throats. It was, a three-headed attack, really, the two running backs and their quarterback. Haynes, right? All weekend I kept hearing
The law
Haynes
firm.
and Haynes. Yeah. But they ran the ball. They controlled the line of scrimmage on offense as well as defense. You mentioned a lot of the defensive prowess, but I have to tip my cap to Brent Key, right? Because he came into a program that forever had been a triple option team, right? Even when they had Kelvin Johnson, they were a triple option offense, right? And you'd see vertical throws, basically a triple option offense. For those of you that might not know necessarily, like, you don't have a lot of passing route tree concepts and pass plays that you call out of triple option. You're basically, it's dive left, dive right, and if the quarterback needs to keep it, he keeps it or he pitches it out, right? That's your three options: dive, keeper, pitch play, right? And then when it's 3rd and 11, because that play didn't work twice, you used to be able to just say Kelvin Johnson, go deep, and we'll throw it to you. And it wasn't working the last few years. So they bring Brent Key in, and they're going to make a change. And it's a huge change, man. Like, I know you understand it, but like going from a triple option offense to basically what they run now is kind of a pro style, hybrid style of offense, to recruit to that and to teach that to players that had been brought in for that triple option style. What he's done, I mean, they had a pretty decent year last year, and then to get an upset of a top 10 team, whether or not you agree with Florida State being one of the 10 best teams in the country, they were number 10 in the nation coming into the week. That's a huge win, man. That's a huge feather in your cap. And you might be right, because what I saw this weekend from Georgia Tech is that they might be a better team than either of us and maybe anybody really, like, across the nation outside of like the city of Atlanta, maybe thought, right? Like, maybe this is a dark horse we should have been paying attention to in the ACC. I know we talked a little bit about Virginia Tech if they can figure things out, but Georgia Tech looked good, man. They were controlling the line of scrimmage. They wouldn't even have needed that last second field goal if their special teams hadn't kind of let them down a couple of times as well. So they played a really good game. I was pleasantly surprised with them and surprised, but Florida State, it feels like there's something there. They're distracted by the ACC stuff, or maybe they were still hanging on to last year, getting left out, that sort of thing. But man, what a terrible way to start the campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tough look for the Noles.
Tough look for sure. So we had Montana State, not an upset. They were a favorite against New Mexico. They come in and knock off a FBS team as an FCS team. SMU looked like they were going to drop one to a team that they were pretty well favored, but also they have so much more talent than Nevada. It doesn't help that they just got so slow. And are they going to pick a quarterback?
Maybe eventually. I mean, you know the old adage: if you got two quarterbacks, you don't have any.
Yep.
So
you got two, you got none, man.
I reckon they probably will.
Yeah. I guess maybe you felt like you could get away with one there against Nevada. And then, despite missing their flight, despite being 1-10 last year, and I have to apologize to the viewers that tuned in last week, I confused Delaware State with their in-town rival, right? They're both in Dover, I believe.
You better double check that before you start talking about UDEL again.
What's that?
So you better double check that before you start talking about UDEL again.
Yeah, right. But Delaware, Joe Flacco's alma mater, is much more of an FCS darling than Delaware State is. But despite missing their flight, despite being an underpowered program and being huge underdog, 36.5, I think was the number it closed at. Hawaii doesn't cover. Hawaii does win, but they don't cover 35-14. You mentioned it's like 80% of the time they've covered over the last few years. So that's probably a feather in the cap for Delaware State, especially after all the turmoil with travel that they had.
Yeah.
That closes out week 0's action. Do you have any other takeaways from week 0 before we start talking about top 25 matchups here in week 1?
Just a gripe with television. Put the Hawaii game on TV somewhere that I can watch it legally. It's week 0. What the fuck else is on TV? Put the football game on. I shouldn't have to go to the website that I went to find the football game so that I can watch it and then have to, have it crash and refresh a bunch of times. Like, put the football game on TV, man.
Right.
I don't put it on Peacock. Who cares? I don't like.
Yeah, just somewhere.
Yeah. Stream it
yeah,
on
that
YouTube.
was disappointing. That was disappointing for sure. All right. Well, let's jump into week 1 here, and we start out with an NC State Wolfpack team that I know is getting a lot of talk in terms of their ability to compete at the top of the ACC against Western Carolina. NC State's laying 32.5 points. You and I are in lockstep on this. What are your expectations for this Wolfpack team this season, and do you see any way they're going to stumble against this Western Carolina team?
No, they're going to beat the shit out of Western Carolina.
Yeah.
Everybody knows Grayson McCall from his years at Coastal Carolina. I believe he threw for 10,000 yards when he was there.
Over like 11 seasons.
Well, yeah, I mean, he and Cam Rising competing for oldest player in college football.
Yep.
But no, Grayson McCall is going to light them up. They're going to have a great week. They're going to look fantastic. They'll be in the top 20 going into next year or next week, I would assume.
Yeah, for sure. I can't wait to see Grayson McCall playing like primetime games, because I used to catch his games with Coastal Carolina because they'd be on like an off channel in a weird time slot. And he was fun to watch. I just hope he stays healthy, because he did get nicked up quite a bit at Coastal Carolina. I hope that with better talent around him, he doesn't have to run and dance around as much as he did at Coastal Carolina, because that's when he would get hurt. So keep him healthy, keep him upright. I think that NC State offense is going to hum. And they definitely should cover this week. Mizzou, McNeese State, 46.5 points. That felt like a really wild spread for McNeese. Isn't like a terrible team necessarily, but Mizzou, are they 46.5 is a lot of fucking points, man. I expect Mizzou to win big, but not 46.5. How do you feel about this one?
I feel similarly. They're probably just going to run out of time.
Yeah.
A spread like that. So the way I view a spread like that, if it's over like 38, 35, is like you have to have a defensive score in there, or you just won't have time to score that many points, really. Like, they're probably not going to play their starters the whole game, if I'm being honest. Brady Cook may not play in the second half.
That's where 40-point spreads go to die, man. If you're up 42-0 at the end of the third, you might just hand off, punt, hand off, punt for the whole fourth quarter. So, yeah.
I did play an online college football 25 game last night. University of South Carolina. Shout out Mike Yuva.
Yeah, buddy.
We went in to Oklahoma. We went in to Boomer Sooner and won 69-0. So intentionally missed the last extra point to keep it at 69.
Yeah. We're still men. We're still children.
So we cover 42.5.
Yeah, that's a smoke check, bud. Well done. All right, Rock Chalk, KU welcoming Lindenwood.
Where is Lindenwood?
I have no. I'm gonna look that up live while you tell me why Kansas is gonna beat them by 63.
Yeah, so I understand that I just talked about the big spreads and defensive scores or whatever. Kansas's offense last year was electric. Quarterback Jalen is back. Jalen Wilson, I want to say. I think that's incorrect. I know his first name's Jalen. Dude's yeah. I literally just looked it up before we started talking, and now I've already forgot it, because as the people who are familiar with our show understand, I'm bad at names. I think they'll score a ton of points. Kansas is one of those teams. They're competing for a Big 12 championship this year, or they are at least attempting to. And if they are going to be competing for that, but maybe not win the Big 12 championship, they're going to need style points all year long. So they got to get the style points wherever they can. Because that Big 12 is going to be extremely competitive. So why not go out and run it up? Whereas, Missouri, I think, has a better shot of making the playoff if they don't win their conference championship, as opposed to, Kansas, like I just said.
Yeah, for sure. Lindenwood, they are in St. Charles, Missouri. FCS school, they went 5-7 last year, so kind of middle of the road. But yeah, I'm with you, KU. That offense is going to scream. We're going to see a lot of offenses in the Big 12 that are going to hum. I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas was covering at half. I think they're going to be able to go right up and down the field on this team. If they're not covering at half, midway through the third, I think we'll be wiping the sweat from our brow and being fine with this cover. Big number, but I think they're going to outclass them pretty badly.
Just for fun, I'm going to look up what the first half spread on that game is, because that could be a number to play.
At 40, what is it?
46.5.
So you're looking at probably a 24.5 point spread.
FanDuel doesn't have it yet. I'll find it as we continue.
I should pull up my DraftKings app just because we're those degenerates.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. We've got Utah facing Southern Utah. Utah is a 38-point favorite, and we are on opposite sides of this one. I'm going to lay the points with Utah. You're taking the points with Southern Utah.
Yep.
I think we professed our love for Cam Rising last week, and that defense, and the fans there in Provo. It isn't a night game, so I'll give you that it's not a night game, and we're not going to get the crazies out. But I think Utah at home, I'm giving a little bit of benefit of the doubt that I think Cam Rising is fully healthy and he's going to be back to being Cam Rising. Talk to me about why you took Southern Utah. Just too many points?
It's a lot of points. Utah, as we know, obviously we love Cam Rising. I get it. He's a big game quarterback. He might be another guy. He's coming off that year-long injury last year that held him out for the entire season, so he gets his medical red shirt to come back and play his super senior year, 7th senior year. I don't know what year he is. I think he's technically listed as a senior. Yeah.
Early bird special.
Yeah, right. He's another one of these guys we may not see play the entire game. If Utah does cover, they probably get a defensive touchdown in here somewhere, or like a special teams touchdown, right? Knowing that Lindenwood, whatever that school's name is in the same state as Kentucky, I feel a little bit foolish for some of my reasoning here, but I feel that Utah State and Utah being from the same state is like, those guys know each other. They probably played in high school. Like, there's a little bit, there may be some animosity. I don't know anything, obviously, right? But the in-state games tend to be a little feistier. So there's potential there for the plus 38. It's also just a lot of points.
Yeah, that's fair. I worry too about the fact that Utah doesn't mind playing the possession style of football either. They'll run the ball and bleed the clock. And I know they play semi-tempo at times, but they are not afraid to squat on the ball and run it, play some bully ball. So that could have me sweating that one late. We'll see for sure. Another one we're on opposite sides of. Oklahoma hosts Temple. If it's anything like what you just did to Oklahoma, I'm in big trouble. I'm going to lay the 42.5. You're taking the 42.5 with Temple. Let me talk to you a little bit. I don't know if I'll be able to swing you. I know 42.5 is a lot, but Temple lost their starting quarterback, and they don't know who their quarterback is coming into the season. They lost a bunch of talent in the transfer portal. They've got a new coach. They've got a lot of turmoil there. That's why I'm going Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's offense is going to continue to be good. The thing that scares me about Oklahoma is that defense hasn't found a way to stop a nosebleed the last 2 years since Venables came there, which isn't any different than Oklahoma before Venables was there, but I thought Venables might be able to maybe fix that defense a little. So that part scares me. If Temple does find a way to score 14 or 21 points, I don't know that Oklahoma's going to be in the 60s. So too many points? Is that kind of what you're thinking with Temple?
Yeah, it's too many points, and they're starting first-time college football quarterback.
Yeah.
I get that Jackson Arnold was a 5-star, but
Sure.
they're gonna smoke them. They'll probably win by like 41. They might win
Yep.
by 42, but 42.5 that's a shit ton of points.
The hook.
Yeah,
The hook makes a difference, man.
it does.
6 touchdowns even plus the hook.
Yep.
All right. Another one of these. We got a few ranked matchups this week. This is one of them. Number 13, Clemson facing number 1, Georgia, in Athens, and Georgia's laying 13.5. We're on opposite sides of this one as well. Talk to me about Georgia. Too much talent? Too good?
Yeah, I don't see how
You also
Clemson
hate
scores. Yeah, well, I do hate Clemson very much. Fucking Dabo dummy, dude. Yeah, he was the only. Well, Clemson was the only program outside of the service academies that did not bring in a transfer this year in the offseason.
I didn't know that.
That's unbelievable.
That's crazy.
Like, what are we doing, bud?
He was taking a stand against the transfer portal.
Yeah, okay. All right. See ya as a fucking grad assistant somewhere next year, dude.
Yeah.
Like, what are we? Come on. You and I are sort of in agreement that we don't love the transfer portal, but at least we understand that, like,
The value
it's a part of the game now. Like,
right. You got to take advantage of it at least.
Come on, dude.
You can hate it, but still need to take advantage of it.
Exactly. So we kind of talked on, I guess it was last week's show, about the offensive struggles that Clemson had last year with, I don't even know his first name. I know him as Lincoln Riley's brother, who came in to run the offense at Clemson. And then they just reverted immediately back to the Dabo Swinney offense, which is not good when you're not producing NFL talent offensive linemen, which they are not doing currently at the University of Clemson. So I'm struggling to see how Clemson scores in this game. I'm not super high on Georgia's offense this year. I think they've had a lot of talent drain recently. They lost a running back already. We don't know if ETN is going to play. I'm not high on Carson Beck. I know a lot of people are, but I can understand why people like him a lot. I get it. It's just not my cup of tea.
Yep.
I think it's probably going to be a lower scoring game than people anticipate. But if I can, is this going to be the only week that we get Georgia as a 2-touchdown favorite? Like,
it might.
Is this going to be the lowest minus sign we see next to Georgia all year?
Yeah.
Because if so, I'm going to take it. Like,
with that schedule, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on basically all the points you made, and that's why I went give me 13.5 with Clemson, because I think this is going to be like give me like 20-13 for this game. That's why I just think 2 touchdowns is too many. While you're correct that Clemson is going to struggle to score, I do think that maybe I'm hoping against hope here, but I think that Cade Klubnik is going to be able to play a better brand of football this year. All that being said, I don't who fucking know. Dabo might still force Lincoln Riley's brother to hand the ball off twice and check down on 3rd down. Who knows? But that defense is going to be good this year. So I do think it's going to be a low-scoring game. Give me like 20-13, 21-13. I'll take the 13.5 because I think it's going to be a close game. I'm not picking Clemson to win this, despite picking Clemson to win the ACC and end up in the playoff. I think this is probably the game that they lose. If they lose 2, I'd be surprised. But I look at the ACC and I think Clemson is going to be able to just suffocate teams and maybe win out. Yeah, the U. Yeah, I picked them as I'm going to keep an eye on the U because I don't trust old Danny boy. But man, we'll see if they figured out the Neil play.
It's fair.
But give me Clemson with the points. I just think it's going to be a tight game.
Garrett Riley is his name, by the way.
Garrett. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. West Virginia hosts Penn State, and we are on the same side of the fence on this one. So I'm going to give you the floor first. I want to hear why you picked West Virginia here to cover or to beat the spread, beat the 8 points here.
Have you ever spent any time in Morgantown, West Virginia?
I have not, but I've heard it's fun.
I have.
I heard it's really awful.
I have been to West Virginia home games. Man, they love college football out there. And you know who's not a good coach?
Yep.
James Franklin. Paul Brown was on the hot seat going into the year last year. It kind of turned that West Virginia program around.
Yep.
I have to imagine that he keeps them on the train tracks headed in the right direction. They need to have a big year. They need to kind of compete for the Big 12. What better way to kick that off, especially to boost them? They'll probably be in the top 25 if they beat Penn State this weekend. I don't know that that's going to happen, but I expect them to keep this game pretty close. West Virginia is a better team than people are giving them credit for. Their offense is very good. I understand the College Game Day will not be there, but Pat McAfee will be there in spirit. He will probably have some sort of West Virginia gear on while he's on the desk down in College Station. It may not be very much gear because it's going to be damn near 100 degrees in College Station, but I have to imagine that West Virginia is hyped up. I've been there. I know what it's like in-house. Just give me West Virginia, man. They excite me a little bit this year. I'm down on Penn State. I don't think Drew Aller is going to have a good season. Penn State defense is always very good, but, miracles happen on week 1.
Yeah, I said it either last week's show or the week before. I think it was last week's show when we were talking playoff teams. If James Franklin is going to save his job, because I think he's finally on the hot seat there in Penn State, if he's going to save his job, this is the team he needed during a crucial season. It is a super talented team. But you said it right. Like, who's not a good coach? James Franklin. He's lucky this isn't a matchup of 2 top 25 teams, right?
Sure.
If West Virginia was ranked, this would be a slam dunk that West Virginia is going to win because James Franklin is that bad against top 25 teams. And he's on the road and all that. I know that this draft class is like the Shedeur Sanders, Quinn Ewers, maybe Carson Beck if he makes good on the hype that other people are giving him. I'm with you. I'm not a big fan of Carson Beck. I think Georgia's offense is going to struggle at times this year. Garrett Green is a guy that I think is going to start to put his name on the national stage. Quietly last season, he was like a top 10 quarterback in college football. And it was quiet because, as you said, right, they came into the year, are they going to compete? Is their coach going to get fired mid-season, that sort of thing? And they turned it around. And Garrett Green, I think he was like 75% completion percentage for the last 10 weeks of the season. And he's a baller. Now, he is undersized, but we're in an era now that doesn't necessarily matter as much anymore. So keep an eye out for the name Garrett Green as we start to get toward the end of this season. I'm not talking Heisman, but I'm talking when he goes to the combine because he's very athletic. He's got a pretty strong arm. He's a guy that can do some things with the football. And I think he's going to carry this West Virginia team maybe to an upset here, man. I'm taking the points for sure. I won't wager the money line. But if we're talking about an upset of West Virginia knocking off Penn State next Wednesday, I will not be surprised.
No, not at all. Also, self-correction, it's Neil Brown, not Paul Brown, who's the head coach.
Paul Brown's the owner of the –
Yeah, I just bad with names, dude. I tried not to throw out names that I'm not 100% sure in, but I was very confident saying Paul Brown for some reason.
I believed you.
It's Neil Brown. I know. One of those generic white man
generic
names.
White boy name. Yeah.
Also, Green, the quarterback, you said not a Heisman dark horse, right? But potential to slide into like first-round draft pick.
I think he's going to be in the conversation.
But you bet me a meal that Caden Salter was going to be a Heisman finalist.
Yeah.
Would you rather have Caden Salter than Mason Green, whatever his first name is? Garrett Green?
I mean, as far as what, NFL stock?
No, I mean, I'd like just for
the season.
I don't know. Yeah, like
I think my biggest thing with Caden Salter and why I made that statement, why I think he's going to New York, is it's a product of one. He's a very athletic guy who's a dual threat guy who potentially is going to have 60 total touchdowns. Right? I said that number last week and I'm going to stand by it. It's Liberty, right? It's the schedule that he's going to play. He's going to win with a lot of style and flair. They've got a very soft schedule for a team that plays in a pretty soft conference to begin with. So that's why I will stand on Salter's probably going to New York. I don't know that Garrett Green's going to put up big enough numbers at a Big 12 school to end up in New York, especially in the same conference as Quinn Ewers, right? I think Quinn Ewers is the Big 12 representative in New York.
SEC.
No? Oh, I'm a fucking idiot. Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
You thinking Noah Fafita?
Fafita could be. Jalen Daniels, right? He could be. He's going to be exciting as well. Texas, I apologize.
Avery
You're in the
Johnson.
big boy conference now, and I tried to put you back in the little boy conference.
Hey, put some respect on the Big 12, dude. Put some respect on the Big 12.
I know. Hard to have the break, right? I did it. We got a week into the season. I already did it.
I said this to someone today who is an Oklahoma fan, born and raised in Oklahoma, big OU guy. I said, and he was touting the SEC, we're big time. And I said, hey, man, the Big 12 is the most exciting conference in college sports right now. If it like basketball, football, the two big ones, it top to bottom, they're the most exciting. I don't care. I get that the Big 10 and the SEC are better, but pure excitement, the Big 12 is where it's at.
Yeah.
And you cannot convince me otherwise.
Yeah. I also don't know that he's going to like the fact that Oklahoma's in the SEC by about week 8. Give it.
Probably not.
Come talk to me in week 8, bud, and tell me how much you love Oklahoma being in the SEC.
Come talk to me after South Carolina rolls in, topples over your boomer sooner freaking carriage wagon.
69-0.
Yeah, come talk to me then when Nick Harbor is putting his name in that Heisman candidacy race.
Yeah, buddy. All right, onward and upward. Iowa laying 22.5 against Illinois State. This pained me to put in there because I don't know if Iowa's going to score 22 points at all this season again, because are they ever going to bring in skill position players ever again? Like, there was a run that they had a couple like good wide receivers and a decent quarterback. And of course they always produce tight ends, but you can't just throw the tight end every fucking down in college football. My only worry is that Iowa doesn't score in the 20s. I don't know that Illinois State's going to score any points against Iowa. This might end up being like a fucking 16-0 game. But I'm going to lay the points because Iowa, from a purely talent perspective, is probably 22.5 points better than Illinois State. Yeah. What are your thoughts? Are you going to sweat? We're going to be sweating this one?
Probably. But I approached it as with like the same thought process of the bigger spreads, like I talked about, the 38s, the 42.5, like defensive touchdowns. Iowa gets special team scores and they get defensive touchdowns. If I can get a defensive touchdown or a special team score, I feel pretty good about the spread.
Yeah.
If I don't get one of those, then we start to sweat it out a little bit. Because 3 touchdowns doesn't get us there.
No,
we need 3 touchdowns and a field goal.
A field goal, yeah.
not 4 field goals.
Right. Come on. And we can't even yell at Kirk because he's not going to be there. All right, we're on the opposite side of this. I know this is a big number. Tennessee laying 38.5, hosting Chattanooga. I think I've gotten a little read on you. This is an in-state one. I think that's part of your thought process, but also big number, right?
Yeah, it's a big number. I lend a lot of credence to the first-time starter. I know that Nico
Iamaleava.
Yeah, I know how to say this. I've practiced it, believe it or not. Iamaleava.
Yep.
Nico Iamaleava. So
yep.
I know he started the bowl game last year, but that was a neutral site game. A bunch of guys on Iowa's defense weren't playing. This is going to be in Neyland Stadium. The freaking first-time jitters are going to be there. I get that he's been
like
on
that
forever.
Point. I think last year with that bowl game, there's something to be said about the fact that like he wasn't expecting to start that game.
Yeah. There's just a lot. Like, he's the first real big NIL deal. Like, I have to imagine there will be some first game jitters. It's probably not going to be super sharp in the first half. Tennessee's going to win by a lot. I don't know if they're going to win by 39 points, though.
Yeah. I like what Tennessee's got around him. So as long as Nico avoids mistakes in the first half, I think Tennessee's going to be able to run it up because of the skill position players around him, and they've got a really good offensive line. Again, I don't think they have as good of an offensive line this year as they did last year, but it's still a good offensive line. I just think that that's going to rule the day, and they've got a lot of speed on defense too, so I think that they're going to be able to really terrorize Chattanooga's offense. I just think it's going to be one of those skill and talent dwarfing a team that doesn't have nearly as much skill and talent. 38.5 is a lot. Might be sweating this one out. I might need a garbage time touchdown from like the third string running back to get to 42 or something like that, but I'm going to lay the points with Tennessee in this one. I'm excited to see Nico too an off season and him ready to take the reins. I'm excited to see that because I saw really good flashes against. I know it was a depleted Iowa defense, but I saw really good flashes in that bowl game from him. So I'm excited to see what they can do, him and Heupel, and the way they can get that thing going.
Yeah.
All right, Oklahoma State is hosting. Now the name is fucking eluding me.
Two-time champion, two-time back-to-back national title, South Dakota State.
South Dakota State. That's right. I don't know why the Jackrabbit was eluding me.
Yep.
9.5 points. And I felt like this number, despite being back-to-back national champion, right? I understand that. 9.5 in Stillwater against a Heisman candidate. I don't know. How did you feel about this number when you first saw it?
I kind of laughed at it like the Georgia number. I was like, Georgia's they're less than a 2-touchdown favorite? Like, what? This is a touchdown and a field goal wins you covers the spread. Like,
right.
That's crazy to me. Plus, if we listen to what Mike Gundy said, Ollie Gordon's could have took the rock 45 times in game one. Like, and we know what he does against like Division I FBS competition. I understand 2-time back-to-back national championships, FCS.
Right.
Like, you're coming to Stillwater to play with the big boys. Now
they're on the Ollie Heisman train.
Oh yeah, 100%.
They want him to win a Heisman.
I want him to win a Heisman because I gave him out back in February at 24,000 to 1.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I felt like you with this. I didn't feel the same way about the Georgia number necessarily, but yeah, I looked at it and I was like 9.5. Like, what are we doing? What does Vegas know that I don't? Is Ollie not playing? Like, that'd be my only reason to think like 9.5. Maybe they're missing their Heisman contending running back. Maybe this number was placed and set back when he was in a little bit of trouble, but he's not suspended. He's playing. I don't know, man. 9.5. I think I'm running to the window before they change this number on me. So
yep.
All right. Ohio State, Akron, Ohio State 48.5. This is one of those big numbers that we are both gonna lay. Ohio State has probably, maybe Georgia's got a claim to it, but probably across the landscape, on paper, the most talent of any team in college football. Now, whether Ryan Day and company can put it together is going to be another story. For me, that's the reason I picked Ohio State against Akron. I just don't know that Akron's going to have any horses to be able to keep up. This is another one. I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State was covering like early in the third. I think they're just going to run it down their throats. I think they're going to be able to move the ball through the air a little bit as well. This might be the week we see why Will Howard won the Heisman in my first season in college football 25. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I don't think Akron scores in this game.
Yeah.
I don't think Akron scores. I think you have two guys that could go for 750 yards on the ground apiece and maybe 10 touchdowns each. Like,
yeah.
In this game. They definitely could both go for like $125 and it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, I could see 250, 300 from those guys combined for sure.
So yeah, I get it. It's a lot of points. Ohio State's on a warpath this year. Jim Harbaugh is gone. The scary man has left the neighborhood. Oregon you can get a lot of Oregon buzz coming into the Big Ten this year. I think Ohio State is out and they're on a mission. There are a bunch of guys on that team that were projected like day 1, day 2, a couple of day 3 draft picks, especially on that defense that said, hey, we are not going to leave Ohio State without beating Michigan. We're coming back. And I think that's a team. Talk about a coach who's on the hot seat. If they fucking lose to Michigan again, Ryan Day's got to go. Like, now I don't think that'll happen, but like, This is a team that is coming in and every week they're trying to set a precedent that, hey, we are the best team in college football.
Yep, for sure. They're on a mission this year. Like you said, the boogeyman's no longer up there in Ann Arbor. All right. Moving down the list here, Texas laying 32 against Colorado State. I think Texas has as much talent as they've had in the last 2 decades, maybe since Vince Young was there. and maybe even a little more talent than when they had Superman under center. Against the Colorado State team that was game last year against Colorado early in the season, they no longer have their edge rusher that was terrorizing everybody last year. Any chance Colorado State keeps this thing close? I know you're laying the points, but you're pretty confident in Texas.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident in Texas. Again, a big number.
Are we going to see Arch Manning play this week?
Oh, Jesus. I doubt it.
No?
No, I don't think so. I think they just leave Arch Manning in and hand the ball off to whatever running back is healthy, which is not very many in Austin.
No, it's not. That's the one worry for me is, are they going to be able to get somebody behind Quinn Ewers there to actually tote the rock, because they got some talent. They just can't stay healthy. That's for damn sure.
I'm sure they have some 5-star kid who just won a state title, who's a true freshman.
They'll figure it
That's
out.
like, oh yeah, come on up, and he'll rush for 1,000 yards this year.
Yeah. Speaking of unhealthy Texas backs, Jonathan Brooks still recovering in the NFL, so they got to find a way to keep running backs healthy down there.
Jonathan Brooks, just a member of a trade today in one of our fantasy leagues.
In our fantasy league, right? Yeah. On the move. All right. Miami going into the swamp, laying 2.5 points against Florida. We are on opposite sides of this. I'm going to give you the floor first. Talk to me about Miami going into Gainesville, making the trip up the highway and facing Florida in the swamp.
So I heard something today that I did not I subliminally I knew this, but I didn't realize it. Did you know that Mario Cristobal and not Dan Lanning, the guy who's at Florida, Billy Napier?
Napier.
Yeah. Did you know they were hired 8 days apart?
I didn't know they were.
I thought that was pretty interesting. And I think that Billy Napier, despite having, and this may sound crazy, he has more resources at the University of Florida than does Cristobal at Miami, who has just about as much as anybody in the country. But Florida, I mean, they're Jordan Brand, they're an SEC school. We get how much they have. I think that Mario Cristobal has done a better job of rebuilding the program that he inherited, which honestly was not in that bad of a position under a guy who's now coaching at Duke. Again, Manny Diaz. I think that Miami's just done a better job. Obviously, they brought in Ward and Damian Martinez to play running back. I just think Miami's better. I get that the swamp is going to be fired up. I totally understand that. If this game were reversed, I would still feel similarly, even though Miami doesn't really have a huge home field advantage. I just think that Miami's better. I think that Cristobal is a good coach. I understand that he has some in-game stuff that he has to work with, like clock management and situational football stuff. But those are things that can be remedied on the fly. I think you and I both said that he should have been fired on the spot last year after they lost to Georgia Tech, which we may have rushed judgment, but that was egregious.
We weren't that far off base, though.
No, not at all. But whoever loses this game is going to be
firmly on the hot seat.
Yeah, that's going to be a bad look. I get that Florida has maybe the toughest schedule I've seen ever in college football in my lifetime.
6.
Yeah, but if you lose this game, I don't think it makes it through the season.
Yeah, I agree with that. Despite having the conversation with you about thinking Miami has a chance to be a dark horse this year, I've talked myself into money line Florida Gators in this game. I think that a name that maybe not everybody knows, but they're going to know by the end of the season, Eugene Wilson III, Esquire, Junior, whatever you want to call him. He's exciting, and I know everybody knew Ricky Pearsall last year in terms of his ability to be a playmaker. Eugene Wilson might be a better playmaker than Ricky Pearsall. And they're returning Graham Mertz, who, despite a tough start to the season, had a much better finish to the season last year. He ended up completing, I got the number here, 73%, best in the SEC last year in terms of completion percentage. And they returned Montrell Johnson despite losing Travis Etienne. So I think that the Florida offense is going to be good. I worry a little bit about how quickly Miami is going to be able to put it together offensively, because under both Cristobal and you mentioned his predecessor Manny Diaz, they have underachieved on offense. And that's been a big problem for the University of Miami over the last 3, 4, 5 years. I don't know that they're going to be able to put it together. I love Cam Ward. If I'm wrong about this, I'm probably going to be big wrong because it means the offense is good and Florida wasn't able to keep pace with them. And if that offense is good, if Cam Ward and them are hitting on all cylinders, I do agree with you that I think Miami is a dark horse to win a national title this year. And I think this weekend is going to be a big proving ground game for Miami for us to make the decision, is Miami going to be back? We talked a lot about Texas being back or not back last year. We've been waiting for the U to be back as well. And, that this is going to be a big game for them going on the road, in-state rival against a team that, despite all the talk about how tough their schedule is, they are returning some firepower on offense. They could be a problem for this Miami team. So we'll see how it goes. But I've talked myself into Florida money line. I am prepared to eat crow next week when Miami wins 43-21.
Go Miami.
Yeah. All right. Bama against Western Kentucky, laying 31.5. I thought this number would be higher, for one. I wonder if this is a Vegas line of like, we're going to be cautious with first-year coach here in Alabama, moving from Washington, who's a fine program, to Alabama, which is a different fucking animal. Jalen Milroe, you think he's got the talent to play the position, but there were times last year when he didn't look great, got benched, and all that stuff last year that he had. 31.5 feels like this is a number that Bama's probably going to cover in cruise control. You disagree?
No, not at all. I mean, I'm high on Bama. You know that. I'm going to take Bama all year long. I just am. Probably all the way through.
I like it. Kalen DeBoer, big first year in Tuscaloosa. Ole Miss against Furman. If you don't know, Ole Miss laying 42. We're both on the side of laying those points. Again, another one of those big numbers that we're going to lay. I've got Ole Miss as winning the SEC this year. I've got Ole Miss as a lock in the playoff. I've got Ole Miss as potentially winning a national championship this year. So I've got to stand by that in terms of that. But I also think that Ole Miss just has enough talent. They're going to really squash Furman.
Yeah, so Lane Kiffin might be looking for new sponsorships for his program after just destroying Coca-Cola, talking about how it's like 140% of your daily sugar intake in one bottle. And you know what sponsors love is wins and points.
Yep.
So give me all the points that Lane Kiffin can accrue.
For sure. He's got to make up for it. Get a new sponsor. All right. K-State opens up against the UT Martin Skyhawks. They have one of the better logos, too. I wish it was bigger that we could see it here. It's a really cool logo. It's like a barnstorming hawk and pretty cool. 37 points. Kansas State is starting the first 5-star quarterback in Kansas, not Kansas State, but Kansas the state in their history under center. I know you mentioned the first-time starters, fairly in-state, not necessarily in-state, but border state. Plus, it's a big number, 37. Talk to me why you picked UT Martin. Is it mostly that, or you got something else?
Yeah, I don't know if Avery Johnson can throw the ball. We know he can run.
Yep.
It's the fastest quarterback I've seen in decades.
Yeah.
That dude is lightning quick, and not like RG3 straight line speed, like change of direction, acceleration. Like he is electric with the ball in his hands. Maybe was Denard Robinson at Oregon.
Yeah,
he was pretty good.
Like yeah.
Lace. Yeah, but like I just don't know if he can throw the ball.
Yeah.
So this was purely a gut reaction when I saw the number. It's a big number. I understand that K-State's good. K-State, I'd never classify them as elite. I always classify them as solid, right? But yeah, it's just a lot of points. That's all.
Yeah. All right. Oregon hosts Idaho, 43.5. I was surprised when I saw this from you. So for me, Oregon's one of the best teams in the country. I think there's like a handful of teams I would talk about in terms of like a national championship contender, and Oregon's in that. I was really surprised to see that you're not going to lay the 43.5. Talk to me about why you went that side.
I probably will be incorrect on this one. I'm just gonna be excuse me. I probably will not win this bet. This is a bet on Dylan Gabriel playing the first half and only the first half.
Only the first half. Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna smoke Idaho.
Yeah.
I had to double check who they were playing because that's how little I think of that program. No offense to anyone in Idaho. I'm sorry.
No offense, Mark Schlereth.
Yeah, yeah, right. Obviously, Oregon is going to win this game. I don't know if we see their first string in the second half.
Yeah, it's
and
gonna
then
be one
you're
of those 42-0 at half and 42-0 after the game.
yeah, like you're liable to get garbage time from Idaho.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, those big numbers can just be scary sometimes.
It can be for sure. 43.5 is a lot. All right, Notre Dame, Texas A&M. This is another one I was surprised to see your pick here because we talked about it last week that we both had Notre Dame as locks to get in the playoff. I'm assuming as you look at their schedule, this is the one loss, right?
Probably.
The Notre Dame team to get into the playoffs, we're looking at this is probably the one loss. So talk to me about why you went A&M though.
It's a home game. Kyle Field, night game, new coach. Their defense is still good despite having a lot of guys leave over the last 2 seasons. I like Mike Elko. I think he's a good coach. I think he's going to have the offense working. I think that defense is still going to be really good. Like I said, I don't know. Well, I said this to you also. Mike Elko was Riley Leonard's head coach last year. He has all of the scouting knowledge on what Riley Leonard is capable of.
Yep.
I don't know that if Notre Dame has to score points in this game, that Riley Leonard is going to be the quarterback to stand in the pocket and sling it around and keep them in this game if it becomes a high-scoring affair, right? Like if they go down 14-0 Notre Dame, I don't know that Riley Leonard's the guy to stand in and battle them back through the air. I also remember watching that Notre Dame team last year and thinking, boy, those receivers just are not getting open. They were super, super young last year. I get it. They have another year of experience. The offseason probably helps. But they, similar to first-year starting quarterbacks, right, they're learning a whole new system. So it's like first game, first year in a new system with a quarterback, right? So I don't love either of these programs. You know this. Everybody who's watched the show for more than 2 episodes understands I'm not a Notre Dame fan. I tend to root against all the schools in the state of Texas, even though I love Texas, which is a weird thing for me.
You love
I struggle. Yeah, exactly. I struggle to find good things. I love Texas Tech. I will say that. I love Texas Tech. I struggle to find good things to say about Notre Dame and Texas A&M, but I just think that a lot of that had to do with Jimbo Fisher, to be fair. And then Johnny Manziel left, and it was kind of all love lost. I don't know that Notre Dame has the offense that people are expecting of them. Estime is gone, who was kind of their bell cow back last year. It's tough to replace one of those guys. I'm open to being wrong about this. I kind of waffled, if I'm being completely honest. I went back and forth a couple of different times, but truthfully, I feel like this game ends at 3. I think it probably is a field goal game, in which case we have a push. Yeah. But I think that Texas A&M will win the game.
Yeah, I went back and forth on this because I think it's a field goal game, right? I think it's 2, 3, or 4 points, right? Maybe it gets to 4, and if Notre Dame's up by 4, we cover the 4, right? But I agree with you. I think it's going to be tight. I trust Notre Dame's defense. I trust Riley Leonard to be safe with the ball. I also trust Riley Leonard to pressure the defense at the second level with his feet, and not need to throw the ball a ton. I'm banking a little bit on the fact that, as you said, yes, that wide receiver core was bad last year, but I also think it was a bit of scheme, and I also think that another year under their belts, you might get guys that are going to get open. They're highly regarded recruits out of high school playing wide receiver at Notre Dame. They've struggled, right? What's it been since Golden Tate that they've really had a guy? Chase Claypool was kind of a flash a little bit. He was more of a tools guy. He was big. He was kind of fast and whatnot, but he wasn't necessarily a dominant wide receiver in college. Notre Dame's been dying for somebody to step up. I'm hoping it's one of these young guys. I'm hoping one of them is going to take the reins at on the outside. But I trust Riley Leonard to be careful with the ball. I trust them to be able to run it and him to put some pressure on the defense with his feet. And I trust Notre Dame's defense, especially with Marcus Freeman still in the building. So 17-13. I'll go maybe that 17-13 Notre Dame.
So you can still get on FanDuel A&M. Well, you can get the spread at 2.5.
2.5. Okay.
Yeah.
I would 2.5. I'd feel a lot more comfortable. 3. I think we're going to push. If Notre Dame even, I think it's a field goal game. I agree with you. I think it's going to probably be a field goal game one way or the other.
Yeah.
All right. And just to reiterate as well, College Game Day is going to be in the building for that. That's the game of the week. So we're going to have a pretty raucous environment before the game. And of course, Kyle Field gets nuts, especially at nighttime. College games in general at night get wild, but Kyle Field could get real wild.
There is nothing better than a night college game.
No,
there is not.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Onward. Michigan hosting Fresno State, laying 20.5. We're on opposite sides on this. My pick is kind of twofold. One, I don't know that I trust Shamar Moore right now. I don't know that I trust Michigan's offense because they lost every single impact player on that offense from last year. JJ McCarthy's gone. I don't know who's going to play quarterback for them. I don't know who's going to take the reins. I know they've got a running back in Dylan Edwards that can really be a guy that can take control, but I don't know that I trust that offensive line to make holes for them because they lost all 5 starters from last year. They lost 5 guys that had been like stalwart starters throughout their college career. Now they're starting 5 really, really technically fresh faces on that offensive line. I'm not sure what they're going to be able to do defensively. They lost, some pieces there, but Sanders still was a real difference maker there. I think they're still going to be really good up front, which probably could be the reason that this Michigan team is still going to compete. I don't know that I'd trust that number 9 ranking for them. I think it's kind of hangover hype from winning the national championship last year. And then on the other side of the ball, Mikey Keene had a good year last year, 24 touchdowns. I've got the numbers here, completed 67% and almost 3,000 yards. He played at UCF. He was pretty good at UCF. Now he's at Fresno State in his second year. He's clear-cut number 1 there. And I think Fresno State has enough playmakers. They've got a decent running back in Malik Sherrod. I think that Fresno State's going to do enough. 20.5 just felt like too many, man. I don't know that we're going to see Michigan clicking on all cylinders early in the year. I think the transition from Harbaugh to Moore is going to be bigger, more impactful than I think it's getting credit for. So give me Fresno State. I'm not picking them to upset, but I'm going to take the 20.5 points.
Awesome. I'll book that for you if you want to bet it with me because Fresno State going to the Big House at 7:30 at night against a defense that retained its 4 best starters from last season. I'll take that. And brought back a 1,000-yard rusher in Donovan Edwards. Yeah, I'll take that.
Donovan. I said Dylan. I'm fucking Dylan Gabriel, Dylan that whatever.
So I was talking to a guy who's born and raised in Michigan, lifelong Michigan fan, and he goes, yes, Sharon Moore was actually the most important coach on this team last year. He goes, he's the one that really kept that team all together. It wasn't Harbaugh. I was like, what? He goes, yes, Sharon Moore was around them more last year than Harbaugh was. I was like, but Harbaugh was the head coach who built the roster. What?
He was also allowed to be with the team. He just couldn't be at games.
Yeah, I was like, okay, man, that is just blind loyalty to your program. That's what that is.
That's why I'm over here like coyly nodding. Like, that sounds like somebody who's trying to convince themselves that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, I'll introduce you to him next time I see you.
Okay. Let's do it. All right. Arizona hosting the Lobos. We just saw the Lobos struggle last week against an FCS school. Arizona's laying 31. They've got playmakers. They returned probably the best wide receiver quarterback combo that's in the Big 12, right? In the Big 12, it's going to be the best wide receiver quarterback combo. has the potential to be the most productive wide receiver quarterback combo in college football. We'll see how that plays out, but they're going to be electric on offense. 31 feels pretty comfortable. This should be like a 38-42 probably point win for Arizona. You see it the same?
Yeah, I think that. So they brought in Mitch Brennan, I believe was his name, head coach at
that sounds right.
San Jose State last year. This is another. You mentioned Fafita and McMillan, the QB wide receiver combo. Those guys, I talked about Ohio State being on a mission. Those are guys that could have left with their coach, Jed Fish, to go to the Big Ten, go to Washington, kind of take over that program there. These are two guys that chose to stay in Arizona. And I think that they are also going to be on a mission to put on a fucking show every single week. They're going to be trying to get the other one of that combo to New York to be in that Heisman finalist group, right? So yep. I think they're going to be incredible. What's that?
Brent Brennan.
That's right. Yeah. The alliteration.
Name.
Right. He's a good coach. I don't know if he's as good a coach as Jed Fish is, but I mean, time will tell, right? They have a ton of talent, especially in those two guys. This will be our first Big 12 after dark game, I guess, because it's not Pac-12 after dark. So it's like,
yeah,
whatever. It should be exciting. They're going to score a lot this year. It'll be a good time. They're going to win by a lot.
Yeah,
excuse me.
Sure. All right, USC goes into the Bayou. LSU laying 4 points.
USC's playing ODU this weekend. What are you talking about?
Playing ODU. Why did I have what did I mess up on?
Oh no, you're talking about University of Southern California. Sorry.
You got me. You had me over here thinking I fucked the goddamn graphic up.
No, you're talking about the University of Southern California.
Southern California goes into the well played, sir. Well played. You had me over here fucking panicking like I fucked this goddamn graphic up. The wrong USC. Southern California goes into the Bayou and lays 4 points. I don't know what to expect from LSU this year, right? I just don't know. They lost Neighbors, they lost Daniels, they continue to put talent in the NFL at the quarterback and wide receiver position, and then they continue to like reload over the last few years. I think, I don't know if I can trust Brian Kelly either. I always felt that way when he was at Notre Dame as well in big games. I don't know that I qualify this as a big game necessarily because it's Southern Cal against LSU. This is a ranked on ranked matchup, so we could call it a big game for that reason. I just don't know that Southern Cal is going to be able to go into the Bayou and compete with LSU. They continue to have like playmakers everywhere. I just don't know what to expect from LSU this year. Talk to me a little bit about this. Talk some sense into me about LSU. Are they going to be good or I don't know. Are they going to get 50 points a fucking game again this year?
Man, I don't know. That's the hard part, right? I like Garrett Nussmeier, I think looked pretty good in that offense in the bowl game, right? He took over for Jay Daniels when Daniels did the classic thing of I'm gonna leave school 6 weeks early and go fuck off in the NFL. So Nussmeier I thought looked pretty good in their bowl game. I think he'll be fine. I'm not like their offense will be good. I don't think it's gonna be earth shattering the way that it was last year, but I also don't think their defense can be as bad as it was last year. Because similar to Southern Cal, who's coming into this game, I don't think either of them practiced tackling once.
No.
Probably not. I know for sure that Southern Cal didn't. That's a documented thing is that they don't practice at practice.
Yeah.
Now, I believe both programs have new defensive coordinators, so that, at least in the first week of the season, has to help a little bit. I think this is going to be a high-scoring affair. Miller Moss, a lot of people like him as a dark horse Heisman guy because all Riley Leonard does is produce Heisman quarterbacks. He's a guy who played after Caleb Williams, did the same thing that Jay Daniels did, said, I'm going to go train for the NFL. Yep. Miller Moss steps in, controls the offense just fine. They look pretty good. I laid the points with LSU, -4. It's a standalone night game in Death Valley, man. Good fucking luck.
Yeah.
Go on a holiday weekend. They're going to start drinking for this game. They might have already started drinking for this game. It's Wednesday. Like,
They might have.
If not, they're starting at 5 p.m. on Friday, and they're not stopping until
they're gonna power right through
p.m.
Sunday.
on Monday. Like, the folks down there are built different, and they will let you know it as soon as you step foot into that stadium.
Yep. Yeah, that tailgate experience, man. Just seeing it on camera and from afar. Ooh, boy.
Bucket list.
Yeah. Yeah, you ain't kidding. Getting to the Bayou for a night game, especially down in Death Valley. Ooh, yeah, for sure. I am curious to see who is going to be that guy at wide receiver because I mentioned Neighbors and I sold Brian Thomas short. I don't want to. I've talked about him in terms of how I think he's going to be as an NFL wide receiver. Who's going to be the guy to step up? Brian Kelly seems to think this Kyron Lacey, who was decent last year in some spots, but I am curious to see how that offense is going to respond to losing that much talent and they didn't really bring in guys that you'd necessarily, they're not household names in terms of guys that came in. I think their run game is going to be much, much better this year as well. So maybe that's going to be the equalizing factor for this offense to stay strong. But yeah, I don't know, right? I don't know what to expect from this LSU team because I did not expect that LSU defense last year to give up 50 points multiple times. It was unbelievable watching some of those games where it was like Jaden Daniels, you could see him on the sideline just like, I got to go fucking score a touchdown every time I have the ball or we're going to lose. It was wild. And it wasn't for lack of talent on that side. You mentioned the new defensive coordinator at LSU, USC, Lincoln Riley probably had no choice but to fire the old defensive coordinator or he was going to lose his job potentially because they've underachieved pretty badly the last couple of years. It'll be interesting. One of these two teams is going to come out of this with what appears to be a big win against a ranked opponent, and we might learn a lot about one or both of these teams for sure. Florida State still ranked in the top 10 after the disappointing loss to Georgia Tech. They've got an opportunity to bounce back against what could be a scrappy Boston College team again this year. They were scrappy last year, or Florida State could finally figure out that they've got more talent than the team playing across from them and go and drub them. We talked a little bit about Florida State's kind of on the do not bet list, and then both of us picked them to cover 16.5 this week. Talk to me about why you picked Boston College. Or, I'm sorry, why you picked Florida State to cover against Boston College.
They just can't be that bad again?
Right.
What I did not account for going into this game was that Bill O'Brien is now the head coach at Boston College. And he's a guy that I understand if you think he's a bad personnel person. I get it. But he was a guy who started Tom Savage in an NFL playoff game at quarterback. So, say what you want about his personnel decisions. The guy just knows how to call a ball game.
Yeah.
So maybe I should have taken that into consideration whenever I made my pick. But I have to imagine opening night at Seminole Stadium, I believe it's Seminole Stadium down there in Tallahassee. They are another school that will be partying from Friday until this fucking game on Monday. And that place is going to be raucous and wild. I cannot imagine that they look as bad in week 1 as they did in week 0. So I'm just going to go with them. I don't think Boston College is going to be that good, but Bill O'Brien may be able to scheme a couple of things up, at least on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, that was what gave me a lot of pause. And at one point I actually had BC down and then I erased it and put Florida State in. So I don't know. This might be they might cover by a hook, right? It might be 17 that they win by 31-14 or I don't know, whatever it might be. But I do think that you're absolutely right. And I think that Bill O'Brien, that's not an empty cupboard up there offensively for him to work with. Thomas Castellanos, a name nobody knows and most people probably still won't know at the end of the season. But he's a good, not great quarterback. They brought in a transfer from North Carolina who has the record for most touchdowns by a tight end in North Carolina history, could be a playmaker. They've got some size on the outside. So the offense might give Florida State a little bit of problems. I just don't know what to expect defensively from Boston College. I think Florida State, if they do what they should have done last week, they may run for 300 yards and be able to control this game. I just think that you've got to have a pissed off Florida State team after that loss that you're probably going to get a raucous environment back at home without the international travel. You're probably going to get Florida State kind of juiced up, ready to knock off BC.
Yep.
All right, buddy. Well, that finishes up our week 1 preview. I want to float out to you. We talked a little bit last week. Go ahead.
I have one more pick from
Okay.
this weekend that was not on our board.
Okay.
Do you know the name of Marion Hampton?
I know the name.
North Carolina running back.
Yeah.
So he's back at North Carolina. They're going to Minnesota to play Golden Gophers.
Okay.
Who are looking to have a bounce back season offensively. I don't know if you remember last year, their head coach, that was Iowa State. I'm speaking out of a fucking ass right now. Iowa State's head coach tried to fight a fan like on the way out.
Oh, yeah.
Either way, Minnesota had a down year last year. They're looking to rebuild, right? Get back in the swing of things, offensively, especially. This over-under is at 50.5. I'm going to hammer this over, right? You can get it at minus 110. I'm sure you can find different odds for it, whatever. I'm looking at minus 110 for over 50.5. Not going to play the spread, not going to play the winner. Just give me the points in this game. I believe it's a Friday night game. It's tomorrow. It's tomorrow night at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
I think it's going to be a lot of points. It's kind of, I know we're not doing like lock of the week or whatever, none of that stuff. But I cannot imagine looking at this team, especially this North Carolina team, which has been very successful on offense the last 4 years in a row.
Not great on defense.
And not great on defense, exactly. With the Marion coming back, give me the over 50.5.
I like that. I'm going to put that on my ticket this weekend. Over 50.5. I like that. Picking one off the board. I like it. I like it a lot.
You know I like to go off the board.
Oh, for sure. We're gonna spray the board and see how the weekend goes because we've got 5 fucking days of college football.
It'd be so cool.
Hopefully my DraftKings app fucking survives the weekend.
we have 5 days of college football. I have 3 fantasy drafts this weekend, including one at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning.
I don't have one at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning. Whoever that fucking asshole is that scheduled that. But I do have 3 this weekend. I have one going on right now. It's one that we've been doing over the last couple of days. It's like one of those not live drafts.
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 this weekend, and then I have another one. We have another one on Wednesday next week. So it's fantasy football season.
We may want to tee off early next Wednesday.
Yeah, I think
on auction draft, so we have to be locked in.
Yeah. So I think probably we'll make the announcement on the page, but we might be looking to kick off at 6 or 6:30 if you're going to be available that early.
Yeah.
So keep a lookout on the page for a time change next week. We're gonna flex so that we can make sure we're available for our fantasy draft because, like as Bentley just said, it is an auction style draft. So. We can't necessarily just wait for the and make our pick.
Yep.
All right. Well, last week we put this on hold because I showed up super late because I lost track of time. But we're gonna finish each week talking about something that revolves around like college football tradition and that sort of stuff. And we were gonna talk about this last week, but we'll refresh it this week. Bentley. We've gone through a lot of changes when it comes to figuring out who's going to play for or who's going to be the national champion. I couldn't imagine ever going back to what we had before the BCS, right? Where it was like we could have co-national champions because the AP and the coaches couldn't agree on who they voted for. We could have situations where like when Miami and Nebraska played and Nebraska went for 2 and then Penn State was playing and they were competing against the team that was playing in a whole nother game to see who was going to win the national championship. There's so many situations from the pre-BCS era that I don't know how people ever felt settled after a college football season. I'm sure it was spectacular entertainment when it comes to college football and the way it was played, but I just couldn't imagine like co-national champions and stuff like that. It's an odd concept to me. We had a lot of gripes during the BCS era in terms of the computer sometimes would favor a conference or a team or a schedule or opponent or whatever it may be. And there was a lot of debate in terms of who should be the two teams to play for the national championship. One year I remember in terms of controversy was the year that Bama lost to LSU by a field goal in the SEC championship game, and then we got that as a rematch in the BCS national championship game, and Bama beat LSU for the national title that year. Nicky Saban getting one up on his former LSU program that year. So years like that, right, where you had some controversy about who should have been in the national championship game. The BCS had 13, I believe it was, like algorithms that it took in, plus the coaches poll, the AP poll, etc. Then we end up with the playoff, and at 4 teams, I think you and I both agree that we felt like 4 teams was pretty solid, but I think we also all felt the inevitability of money, TV dollars. We were going to expand the playoff. So I want to reminisce a little bit. All right. I want to hear from you. What is one thing now that we are in the post BCS era for I think 7 years, and now we've expanded the playoff? What is one thing you miss about the BCS era of college football?
So I can admit that the BCS era of college football had its flaws, right? I don't think there's any. The purest form of competition is to settle the debate on the field. Understood. I get it. That's kind of what we're driving towards with the expanded playoff. Everybody wants to see the best teams play the best teams. Despite my feelings about it or whatever, that's what we're aiming for, right? Is having the best 2 teams play for the national title every single year. And if you think the way to do that, or if whoever the committee thinks the way to do that is to have as many teams play each other with a single elimination tournament, then that's what they do. Got it. The number one thing that I miss from the BCS era of football is that the New Year's bowl games mattered to each individual school when you got that invite. When you get that invite with that care package, whether it's headphones or a new gaming console or tickets to Disney World, whatever it is, if you're going to Frisco to play in the freaking Tostitos Bowl, that fucking meant something, right? Because sure, you may not get to play for the national title, but if you're a one-loss team, you probably didn't deserve to play for the national title under that system, right? Nowadays, and we kind of alluded to it earlier, talking about this LSU game where Caleb Williams and Jade Daniels, I jokingly said they fucked off to go train for the NFL, but that's kind of what they did, right? Like, I get that they were on the sideline for the game, for the bowl games that the teams played in, but like Christian McCaffrey did this. I remember at Stanford. Marvin Harrison Jr. did it. Like, it happens every single year where, like, especially with the 4-team playoff, it was a little more prevalent. I think there was one of the benefits that I could see coming from an expanded playoff is there will be less guys sitting out these playoff games. So that's cool. I credit where credit's due. I get it. But it used to be important to play in a bowl game if it wasn't a playoff game. We don't get Boise State running the Statue of Liberty if their starters, if Kellen Moore is saying, hey, I'm probably not going to play in this bowl game because I want to go get ready for the NFL. Like, that's kind of like, that's lame, man. Like, play in the fucking bowl game. I understand that you're trying to avoid injury. The injury rate for these bowl games is extremely low. Compile that together with your percentage of chance to be drafted in the NFL, it gets even lower. Like, if you're a guy who is a borderline NFL dude, like, there's guys. I'm going to say this, and I don't know it to be 100% true, so please forgive me if I'm incorrect and somebody looks this up. I would bet that there were players who did not play in their bowl game and then went to the week of the Senior Bowl down in Alabama. They're like, hey, I don't really care about the bowl game. I'm going to get ready for the NFL, but I need more tape. So I'm going to go down to Montgomery. I'm going to play for a week at these practices and then play in one more game. Just play the fucking bowl, man. I wish I'm sounding like a Debbie Downer, right? But I miss and we've talked about this a lot, the sanctity of the game is that each and every game fucking matters every single week. And the expanded playoff has taken that away a little bit, but this segment was about how much each individual bowl game mattered for the teams that were selected, specifically the New Year's bowl games, the Citrus Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, those games, the Tostitos Bowl, whatever, the Rose Bowl is the other one. I miss when those were a big fucking deal.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Like, it was different then in terms of the New Year's Bowls, and now I don't even the part that probably maybe nails that home the most is like, do we even really talk about the New Year's Six anymore? Right? Like, it used to be New Year's Six, and then you had the BCS National Championship. Now it's like, oh, here's a playoff game, and oh yeah, by the way, they're playing the Fiesta Bowl over here because it's not a playoff game and it's just a game, right? It feels that way. It really does, because obviously you don't have, now you do, right? You have enough games that you're going to be able to kind of fit all these big sponsorships and these big games in the playoff and stuff, and it's just going to rotate who's in the semifinal and the final, yada 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 yada. But you just don't talk about New Year's Day bowls the way that you used to. So yeah, that's a really good one. Mine's a little more kind of fun and quirky in terms of what I miss about the BCS era. I miss that for a month after the conference championship games, when we got the BCS rankings on that Tuesday after the big conferences played their conference championship games, from that day until the BCS national championship game was played, we heard all about the computer systems. And Ken Massey's name probably came up 1,000 times during that month between when the BCS rankings came out and told us who the two teams in the BCS championship were, and when we actually played the game on the field, especially in the years when it was a close race, right? 1, 2, 3, maybe even 1 through 4. When it was close, you got a lot of that kind of, well, Ken Massey said this, well, Dr. Wolf said that, and this computer this, and the AP poll that, and oh, if the coaches had voted them just a little higher, that sort of thing. I miss that because it was so fun hearing like guys like Kirk Herbstreit try to like explain why Ken Massey's computer system was more accurate than this other one, and it holds more weight, or it should hold more weight, and this and that. It was awesome to hear that, and then to hear the word eyeball test so many times during that month lead up to the national championship, trying to explain why Miami and Ohio State got in and some team got left out. So I missed that because it was really, in my eyes, I thought it was really high entertainment to hear them break down the computers versus the 4 polls that were involved in it as well. So that's the big thing for me.
Can I give you not like I'm moving past this segment, not to be rude. It's a good segment. It's a good segment. This is funniest outcome for me this football season. I would like Florida State to go undefeated the rest of the year and lose in the ACC championship game, and then have to debate with the College Football Playoff Committee why a 2-loss Florida State team is now being held out of the 12-team playoff because a 3-loss conference, I don't know, MAC winner is now getting in over them. That's what I desire most for this season.
Yeah,
I've decided that would be funny.
That would be great. That would be great for sure.
Maybe we can get Ken Massey to come back in and tell us why Florida State deserves to be in the college football playoff.
Yeah, get him on the horn, man.
Yes.
Hey, so we had a kind of surprise last-minute entry from Big Stove, who used to be on the show with me, and we miss him. Door's always open, Stove, if you want to come hang out and chatter a little bit. But
sure, I'll shut up.
He wanted to know a little bit, and we've talked kind of around this and about this a bit, and you and I especially have had like conversations about this, not necessarily on the show, but kind of in our spare time, being the junkies that we are for ball. He's curious if you think the expanded playoff is going to lead to teams scheduling better teams, right? We've talked about this, and I know you have very strong feelings about kind of the impact that the expanded playoff is going to have. For me, I'll answer this kind of briefly, and then I'm going to give you the floor because you've got some real good thoughts about kind of what the playoff impacts are going to be. But he's wondering if, like, are we going to get better games in the season, better quality games in the season? Because now with 12 teams, you can look at a team like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, those teams that are going to be in the top 5, top 10, right? They could probably survive 2 losses and get in the playoff, right? Especially if they play another top 25 team on their schedule and that's one of their losses, right? If they schedule out of conference against, say, Bama schedules Ohio State and Ohio State knocks Bama off and then they lose one game in the SEC, but maybe it's the SEC championship or whatever, and they've got 2 losses, they'll probably get into the playoff. I don't know that it's going to change a ton because I think we've seen just the playoff itself lead to a little bit of that. And I don't know if we're going to get too heavy with that because you have teams that play in the Big Ten now that the Big Ten has expanded and brought in some, really good West Coast schools that could potentially be threats there. The SEC added 2 monsters from the Big 12, and the SEC was already the SEC. I don't know that we're going to see like Bama go schedule 2 or 3 good out-of-conference opponents because you still got the gauntlet of conference play to deal with. But what I have liked about the playoff era is that I feel like, and I could be wrong about this, but from just a gut feel, it feels like teams have been more willing. Georgia's been willing to schedule Oregon out of conference to open the season. Ohio State, Oregon, right? That was an out-of-conference game a few years ago that they played early in the year.
They tried to play Texas last year, but they didn't give it to them.
Right. It feels like there's been more effort to get some of those marquee games during the regular season, during the playoff era, because you don't have to, as we just talked about with the BCS, you basically had to go undefeated if you were going to have a chance to get in the BCS. So it was really like you got a lot of UT Chattanooga against fucking Alabama sort of out of conference scheduling. So I don't know that the expanded playoff is going to change it, but I will say that it feels like that's been a kind of collateral win for the college football fan, that it feels like there's been more of those games scheduled during the playoff era. So I don't think the expansion is going to change much, but I like that that's a benefit we've gotten during the playoff era. So, all right, I'll get off my soapbox. The floor is yours about whether you think this is going to make much of an impact.
So I first off, I agree with what you're saying that the playoff itself does lend itself to scheduling higher quality opponents during the season out of conference. We talked about Oregon and Georgia. Georgia tried to play Texas last year. You get A&M and Notre Dame. That's not a conference. You get these matchups that are big time out of conference matchups. So the playoff, because the committee doesn't have a set criteria, and their criteria, if you will, previously was to determine the 4 best teams. It was not the 4 most deserving teams. It was not the 4 teams that are undefeated. It was who are the 4 best teams, and that is the reason that Florida State was left out last year. Despite playing a pretty good schedule, they just were not one of the 4 best teams at the end of the year. The best way to determine who the 4 best teams are, as opposed to the previous BCS era, I'm going to call it a committee, but like the computer system that determined was how many wins do you have? What's your margin of victory? That's essentially what they were looking at, right? So you schedule a bunch of these cupcake games, which came back to bite Michigan in the ass in 2007 when they lost to App State. But you mentioned like a UT Chattanooga playing against an Alabama, right? That's a cupcake game for Alabama, so they run the score up, huge margin of victory, another win in the left-hand column. The committee needs to see these teams play each other at high-level junctions to determine who the best teams are, right? Otherwise, you get these teams that are like, well, we deserve to be in. And the committee's like, well, we don't fucking know that because you didn't play anybody. Exactly. So I do agree that the playoff lends itself to these teams scheduling more difficult opponents throughout the year. However, the thing that will ruin the out-of-conference tough opponent schedule is the expanded conferences. Conference realignment. We're currently at an 8-game conference schedule in the major conferences right now. The Big 12 was a little bit excluded from this because they had the round robin that they played everybody every single year, so they were already used to this, right? But another one of the reasons why the Big 12 was so much fun, and it still is, there is talk of going from an 8-game conference schedule to a 9-game conference schedule because we have so many teams in these conferences now that I think if we shift from an 8-game conference schedule to the 9-game conference schedule, we could see even worse out-of-conference opponent matchups than we currently get. And that is when the Big Ten and the SEC just cannibalize themselves because they beat up on each other all season long, right? I get it. Those will continue to be high-level games, but it will not be Texas playing Washington. It's not going to be Oregon playing Georgia. It's not going to be the games that we want to see. It's going to be the games that we see every single fucking year. Yeah. And we're not going to get the boys from Northern Alabama playing the fucking Hogs from Wisconsin, right? Like, that's just not going to happen. So I do agree that the playoff in its previous format with the 4 teams trying to establish themselves as the 4 best teams in the country did lend itself to scheduling tough out-of-conference matchups to prove yourself on the highest stage at these, whether it was a neutral site or whether it was an away game or a home game locations, playing against other highly ranked teams in other conferences that you wouldn't normally play. Well, now you bring Texas, who is a Big 12 team, into the SEC, so you don't have to have that Big 12 SEC touch point, right? That out-of-conference game.
Yeah.
So
that's the marquee program in the
exactly,
Big 12 too, right?
Exactly.
You've now
right?
absorbed that, so that's one less marquee game that you can even schedule.
Exactly. So while the playoff, I think, in its previous format did lend itself to the marquee out-of-conference games, the expanded conference realignment is diminishing the team's ability, especially if we bump it up to 9 conference matchups this season. It's diminishing their opportunity to schedule, and the importance really to schedule the out-of-conference matchups with the other big-time programs.
Yeah, that's a really good point, man. That's really profound when it comes to like understanding how the nuances of the college game, especially from like the fan perspective, is if we go to 9 and who knows, right? We end up with like 64 team conferences, right? 3 of them or whatever, or, we end up with 4 that are around 40 or 50 or whatever. Like, how do we determine how the schedule is going to work there? And then we probably don't get, maybe you get 1 out of conference game a year, right? And is it a regional rival? Is it, a program that you've got like a home and home agreement with, that sort of thing? Maybe we end up with 1 out of conference as these conferences just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because the more you expand it, we don't have the schedule rules that like the NFL does, right? You play your division opponents twice, and then we kind of match like who's higher, who's lower, et cetera, et cetera. So far, anyway, college football hasn't said like Florida didn't get a first place schedule. They just got a fucking fuck you schedule, right? Like typically in the NFL, those first place teams would play that perceived tougher schedule based on last year's finishing, right? Florida, that's not what happened to them because they didn't finish first place in the SEC last year. So far, it doesn't look like there's going to be a concerted effort for schedule balancing in these expanded conferences. Now, we may get that in the long run. It might be here's a road bump we've got to learn from because of how unbalanced the SEC schedules are right now. It used to be that way when the SEC West and the SEC East used to be kind of a cupcake, right? It was pretty unbalanced for the SEC West teams. We might see some change in that, but that's a good point, right? The more conference games we have, the less opportunities we're going to have less opportunities to even schedule those games, because now you've only got 3 open weeks that you can schedule an out-of-conference opponent. And are you really going to want to play another top 10, top 20, top 25 team with one of those weeks when as you put it perfectly, you got to run the gauntlet in these conferences already, and you're going to have some cannibalization in those conferences. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that might have a reverse effect of what the playoff has done for us as these conferences expand, for sure.
Good point. And so like this is only a byproduct of the current conference realignment, right?
Right.
When you mentioned 64 teams, if we have 40 team conferences, whatever, then it ceases to really be a problem, because then you bring in like SMU will go to the SEC, Florida State will be whatever. Like if you have these huge conferences, then you're going to have divisions within these conferences. Yep. And then you'll get sort of that NFL style of like you play division opponents or whatever, which would essentially become like the new conference or out of conference schedule, right?
Conferences.
Yeah. So like if you're playing 10 conference games with like 1 rivalry game at the end, that rivalry game, because it's college and they're geographically located, will probably be a conference rival, right? I'll just use Clemson, South Carolina. At some point, I don't know what the end of conference realignment looks like, but at some point they will probably be in the same conference.
Those two teams will probably be.
Yeah, it'll still be a rivalry game, but that will still be a conference game.
Yep.
Whereas, like, I don't know, like Florida State. No, that's a bad example. I don't know. There is bound to be some example, right? Like currently, we'll take last year for example, right? Like Texas and Texas A&M used to play every year back in the day, right? They used to play every year. That was for the last few years. Granted, Texas A&M kind of broke that off because they joined the SEC. We'll just say that they played that every single year. That would have been a Big 12 Texas A or Big 12 SEC rivalry game. That was an out of conference game. Now, if they bring back that rivalry game, which they can do now because they're in the same conference, it will be a conference rivalry game, but it would still be another conference game on the schedule, right? But if you bring in divisions, like who's to say that Texas A&M and Texas are not in different divisions? And then you could still play the rivalry game. It's a conference game, but you sort of have – it's like the interdivisional thing, right? So if you expand from the current 16-team SEC to a 40-team SEC, the division games become your out-of-conference games because the conference is so big and so geographically sparse, right? Like, so the non-conference big-time games is really only diminished because of the current state of the conference realignment. At least I think that's the case. We are still not going to get the geographically like out of conference games, like the here we go. Fucking Southern Cal is coming to LSU week 1.
Yeah.
If the bottom half of the country just becomes one like conference, that is going to be if it's the Southern Conference, that's a conference game, right? Because LA is probably going to be in the bottom half, but that would not be a division game. Right. So it'd still be an out of division game, but it would be an in conference. So like we would get the separate geographical, but it would be a conference game. I don't know. I don't know if that made any sense, but like the current state of the conference realignment is paired with the current playoff structure is not lending itself to these big time out of conference games.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right, buddy. Well, I hope you're prepared for the next 5 days. We got a long weekend, holiday weekend, but we got a long weekend in terms of college sports. Of course, we've got fantasy draft after fantasy draft. It's fantasy season.
Yeah.
Stay hydrated. Mix in a water.
Or don't. It's the weekend.
Yeah, shit. Yeah,
it's up to you.
It's the weekend. It is the weekend, but. All right, well, thanks for those that I think we had a couple pop in and out, but any of those that are going to watch after the show as well. For Bentley and the rest of us here at Backyard Sports, this has been another episode of Tailgate Trash Talk brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are out.